Any history class contains sources. A good history class contains a mix of primary and secondary sources, but what's the difference? A primary source is something that was created during or is from the historical period that is being examined. Let's take the Dust Bowl, for instance. There are many primary sources that were created during the Dust Bowl, like photographs, journal entries, and even art. We can't forget about speeches, artifacts, and even news articles published while it was happening. If the document or source you are viewing provides a first-hand account, whether that be a photograph or witness statement, you are dealing with a primary source. Primary sources are not without their weaknesses. Historians and students learning history have to be on the lookout for forgery or fraud. In addition, some primary sources, like first-hand accounts or diary entries, can give a heavily biased, incomplete, or distorted account that differs from what actually happened. Not to mention, depending on the historical period being studied, the actual writing or language being used may be difficult for a modern audience to comprehend. If you want to make sure the source you are analyzing is credible, John Spore Broome Library recommends that you consider a couple of questions. Who was the author or creator? When did he/she create the source and why? What was its purpose? What was the historical, or social, religious, etc. context in which the source was created? Who was the intended audience? And how does the account compare to that in other sources, both primary and secondary? Asking critical questions like this can not only help you determine if a source is credible, but it also might help you ascertain some deeper insights. Primary sources can be a powerful tool in history class and come with many strengths. They make history come alive by allowing students to experience a historical event they were not physically present for. With primary sources, we can see what they saw, learn what they felt and thought, or even listen to the very words being spoken, like through a recording of a speech. Analyzing and experiencing primary sources makes the learning process more dynamic and adds color, metaphorically or literally, to history classrooms. A secondary source is something that is created after the historical period being examined took place. Secondary sources can cover the same topic and even use a variety of primary sources, but they usually also contain insights or analysis. Think encyclopedias, websites, or even books. Textbooks are some of the most popular secondary sources around. In addition, most historians and students have created secondary sources themselves, whether that be through an assignment like an essay analyzing a historical event or even a critique on vintage fashion. As for strengths, secondary sources can provide students and researchers with more comprehensive information, given that they can contain multiple primary sources and can summarize large events and even provide insightful analysis. They are often easier to understand than some primary sources. However, secondary sources can be even more prone to bias or misinformation. Secondary sources like books or textbooks can also be outdated because historians and archaeologists are constantly researching and finding new primary sources. Asking some questions about credibility can help you determine if the primary source you are using is accurate and relevant. Questions like, when was it written? Who was it written by? And why did they write this? Are a first good step in determining the reliability of the secondary source. Sources, whether they be primary or secondary, are an important aspect to learning. Primary sources allow students and historians to build their own insights and understanding, and secondary sources can help fill in some gaps and provide completely different perspectives. One thing is certain, using credible sources in education creates more credible learners.